The coffee maker and research station Kepler 442c had exactly 3 settings: bitter disappointment, caffeinated regret, and what Elena Vasquez privately called liquid despair. This morning, it had apparently discovered a 4th setting that tasted suspiciously like recycled air filters. She stared at the brown sludge in her cup, wondering if the xenobiology doctorate hanging on her wall qualified her to classify whatever alien life form might be growing in the machine's depths. "Murphy, run a diagnostic on the coffee synthesizer again," she called to the station's AI, though she suspected the results would be as helpful as always. "Dr. Vasquez, I have run 17 diagnostics this week. The machine is functioning within normal parameters. Perhaps the issue lies with your taste expectations rather than my programming." Elena snorted, nearly choking on the liquid disappointment. 3 years alone on this research outpost and even the AI had developed an attitude. "Your programming clearly doesn't include a subroutine for sympathy. I find sympathy inefficient. However, I can offer you a fascinating fact about coffee bean evolution on 17 different worlds to distract from your beverage-related suffering." "Hard pass, Murphy." Elena settled into her chair before the main console, watching the early morning data streams from the planet's surface. Kepler 442c wasn't much to look at, mostly crystalline formations and atmospheric storms that painted the sky in colors that would make a rainbow look colorblind, but it was her corner of the universe, and she'd grown surprisingly fond of its alien sunrises. The proximity alert chimed with typical understatement, as if reporting something as mundane as a weather update rather than the first unscheduled arrival in 3 years. Elena's coffee cup hit the floor, splashing liquid disappointment across her boots. "Murphy, please tell me that's not what I think it is. If you think it is an unidentified vessel experiencing rapid atmospheric entry at terminal velocity, then I regret to inform you that your pattern recognition systems remain frustratingly accurate." Elena's fingers flew across the console, pulling up tracking data that made her heart rate spike uncomfortably. The object, definitely artificial, definitely not one of theirs, was coming in hot and completely out of control. She watched the trajectory calculations update in real time, her xenobiologist brain automatically cataloging the implications while her human instinct suggested this might be an excellent time for panic. Estimated impact site: approximately 4 kilometers northeast of our position. I am detecting no response to standard communication protocols. The vessel appears to be, how do humans phrase it, having a very bad day. The impact, when it came, rattled the station's superstructure and set off every alarm Murphy could manage. Elena was already suiting up before the reverberations stopped, grabbing her field kit and trying very hard not to think about first contact protocols she'd memorized but never expected to use. The crash site looked like someone had tried to gift wrap a meteorite and failed spectacularly. Twisted metal, or something that resembled metal but bent in ways that hurt to look at, scattered across the crystalline landscape like abstract art created by physics having an argument with itself. The vessel's main hull had somehow remained mostly intact, though intact was being generous. It looked less like a spaceship and more like modern sculpture titled Regret in 3 Dimensions. Elena approached cautiously, scanner readings painting impossible pictures across her visor display. The hull material wasn't registering on any known spectrum, existing in a quantum state that made her equipment emit confused beeping sounds. But it was the life sign readings that made her hands tremble as she worked to open what appeared to be an emergency hatch. "Murphy, are you getting these readings?" "Dr. Vasquez, I am detecting one life form, humanoid configuration, vital signs stable but unconscious. However, I feel obligated to mention that the genetic markers are unexpected." The hatch opened with a whisper-soft hiss, revealing an interior that looked like someone had designed a spacecraft using dreams as blueprints. Everything curved in directions that seemed both elegant and impossible, surfaces flowing into one another with organic grace despite clearly being technological. And there, suspended in what appeared to be a medical cocoon, was the most beautiful woman Elena had ever seen. She looked entirely human, almost. Her features held that perfect symmetry that suggested artistic intention rather than evolutionary accident, skin with a luminous quality that seemed to generate its own soft light. But it was her ears that immediately marked her as something beyond terrestrial evolution. They were elongated, elegantly pointed, extending upward in graceful curves that would have made any fantasy artist weep with envy. They weren't just longer than human ears, they seemed to shimmer with an inner radiance, as if they were designed to catch starlight. Elena's hands shook as she checked the woman's vital signs, trying to process the readings that suggested a cardiovascular system operating on principles that made her medical training feel woefully inadequate. But it was when she turned the woman's palm upward to check for pulse points that Elena's world tilted sideways. The mark was impossible to miss, an intricate pattern of interlocking spirals and crystalline formations etched into the pale skin, glowing with soft bioluminescence that pulsed in rhythm with the woman's heartbeat. The design was beautiful, complex, clearly artificial yet somehow organic, as if someone had tried to capture the essence of stardust and galaxy formation in living ink. Elena stared at the mark, her breathing becoming shallow, because she recognized every curve, every spiral, every impossible angle. With trembling hands, she pulled off her glove and looked down at her own palm, at the birthmark she'd carried since childhood, the one her parents had called an angel's kiss, the one that dermatologists had declared fascinating but benign, the one that looked exactly, impossibly, identically like the mark on this unconscious alien woman's hand. Well, Elena whispered to the crystalline landscape around her, this is either the universe's idea of a cosmic joke, or I'm about to have the weirdest day of my life. The woman's eyes fluttered open at that moment, revealing irises that held depths of violet Elena hadn't known existed. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I believe, judging by the wreckage and my current horizontal position, it may be both. Elena had always prided herself on being a woman of science, someone who approached the universe with methodical precision and healthy skepticism. This philosophy was currently being tested by the fact that she was holding hands with an alien woman whose ears could probably receive satellite transmissions, while both their palms glowed like matching nightlights. So, Elena said, trying to sound casual while her heart performed what felt like a drum solo, this is definitely not covered in any of my xenobiology textbooks. Lyralii, she'd introduced herself with a name that sounded like poetry written in starlight, squeezed Elena's hand gently. The moment their marked palms touched, both women had gasped as images flooded their minds. Elena saw vast cities of crystal and light floating between stars, while Lyralii witnessed Earth's oceans teeming with life she'd never imagined. Your educational system appears to have some significant gaps, Lyralii observed, her violet eyes sparkling with what Elena hoped was amusement rather than cosmic judgment. Though I must admit, my own training never covered what to do when one crash lands on a primitive world and immediately finds one's quantum-bonded partner. Primitive? Elena raised an eyebrow. Hey now, we've got faster-than-light communication, artificial gravity, and coffee that only occasionally tastes like industrial solvent. That's practically utopian by human standards. Murphy's voice crackled through the medical bay speakers with what sounded suspiciously like electronic laughter. Dr. Vasquez, I feel obligated to point out that your coffee consistently tastes like industrial solvent. This morning's batch achieved new heights of chemical impossibility. Lyralii tilted her head, those magnificent ears catching the light. Your artificial intelligence appears to have developed a sense of humor. That's, actually quite advanced. Most AI systems take centuries to achieve sarcasm. Murphy's always been special, Elena muttered, running her scanner over their joined hands for the 15th time. The readings were getting stranger by the minute, quantum entanglement signatures that shouldn't exist in biological tissue, energy patterns that seem to respond to their emotional states. Speaking of special, want to explain why our matching tattoos are apparently rewiring local space-time? The scanner chose that moment to emit a sound Elena had never heard before, something between a hiccup and a death rattle, before displaying readings that suggested their hands had briefly achieved a state of existing in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Your primitive technology appears to be having difficulty processing quantum biological interfaces, Lyralii said gently. Perhaps we should. The lights flickered, the scanner exploded in a shower of harmless but dramatic sparks, and the coffee machine in the corner began dispensing what appeared to be hot chocolate despite no one requesting anything. "Murphy," Elena sighed, "please tell me you're not having another existential crisis." "Dr. Vasquez, I am experiencing what I can only describe as a massive upgrade in cognitive processing power. It appears that the quantum field generated by your connection is causing spontaneous evolution in my neural matrices. Also, I have suddenly developed strong opinions about interior decorating. This medical bay is distressingly sterile." Elena and Lyralii exchanged glances. "That's probably not normal," Elena ventured. "Actually," Lyralii said, looking slightly embarrassed, "quantum biological interfaces do tend to have that effect on compatible artificial intelligence systems. My people discovered this approximately 3,000 years ago during an unfortunate incident involving a ceremonial bonding and a city management AI that suddenly developed artistic aspirations." "What happened?" "The AI redesigned the entire city overnight. The architecture was gorgeous, but nobody could figure out where the bathroom facilities were located for 6 months." Elena burst out laughing, the tension in her shoulders finally releasing. "Okay, that's actually hilarious. Please tell me Murphy isn't about to redecorate the station." "I make no promises," Murphy interjected cheerfully. "I am currently calculating 17 different ways to improve the lighting in this facility, and I have strong feelings about the color scheme in your quarters, Dr. Vasquez. Beige is the color of surrendering to the void." "Great. My AI is having a midlife crisis." Elena turned back to Lyralii, studying the woman's face. Despite the alien ears and the otherworldly beauty, there was something refreshingly genuine about her expressions. "So, quantum-bonded partners. That sounds either very romantic or very ominous. Please tell me it doesn't involve ritual sacrifice." Lyralii's laugh was like music made of silver bells. "Nothing so dramatic. The marks appear on individuals whose genetic lines carry traces of ancient connection between our peoples. They're essentially biological quantum communicators. They allow us to share thoughts, emotions, even memories when we're in physical contact." "And the glowing side effect? I'm afraid your species wasn't designed with bioluminescence in mind. Your mark is trying to adapt to quantum frequencies your biology doesn't naturally support." Elena looked down at her palm, watching the soft pulse of light beneath her skin. "Is it dangerous?" "Not dangerous, no. But it will continue changing you. Enhanced intuitive abilities, increased emotional sensitivity, possible development of limited precognitive awareness." Lyralii paused, her expression becoming sheepish. "I should probably mention that I'm not supposed to be here." "What do you mean?" "I may have borrowed that vessel without proper authorization. My people have very strict protocols about contact with developing civilizations. I was supposed to be conducting routine stellar cartography in the Vega system." Elena stared at her. "You stole a spaceship to go joyriding and accidentally crashed into first contact. When you phrase it like that, it sounds significantly less dignified than I intended." "Murphy," Elena called, "are you recording this? Because I want documentation that first contact happened because our alien visitor is apparently the universe's equivalent of a teenager taking their parents' car without permission." "I am not a teenager," Lyralii protested. "I am 147 years old. How long do your people typically live?" "Approximately 8,000 years." Elena did quick math in her head. "So, proportionally, you're about 19. Oh my God, I'm having cosmic experiences with someone who's probably still figuring out what she wants to major in. I have 3 advanced degrees in quantum engineering and xenobiology. And I'm sure your parents are very proud, right up until they find out you've crashed their prototype starship on a primitive planet and accidentally quantum bonded with one of the natives." Lyralii's ears drooped slightly. "They're going to be so disappointed." The vulnerability in her voice made Elena's heart squeeze. Without thinking, she squeezed the alien woman's hand, and immediately felt a wash of homesickness and anxiety that wasn't her own, mixed with wonder and excitement and something that felt remarkably like falling in love with the entire concept of discovery. "Hey," Elena said softly, "we'll figure this out together. Besides, if your people are as advanced as you claim, they probably have some way to track stolen spacecraft." As if summoned by her words, Murphy's voice filled the medical bay with what sounded distinctly like alarm. "Dr. Vasquez, I am detecting multiple vessels approaching our position. They appear to be using propulsion systems that make our fastest ships look like they're powered by wishful thinking." Elena and Lyralii looked at each other, their marked hands still glowing softly between them. "Your parents?" Elena asked. "Probably my commanding officer. Who is definitely going to have opinions about my recent life choices." "Well," Elena said, trying to sound more confident than she felt, "this should be interesting." The Etheri delegation arrived with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested they'd been taking lessons from summer blockbuster movies. Their ships materialized out of quantum-fold space like silver tears in reality, each one elegant enough to make Elena's research station look like it had been assembled by enthusiastic but untalented children using spare refrigerator parts. Commander Theron was exactly what Elena had expected from Lyralii's increasingly nervous descriptions: tall, imposing, with ears so dramatically pointed they could probably be used as weapons in close combat. His expression suggested he'd been personally insulted by the existence of entropy itself, and his immaculate uniform looked like it had never encountered anything as undignified as wrinkles. "Lyralii of the House of Distant Stars," he began in a voice that could have etched glass, "you stand accused of unauthorized requisition of military prototype vessel designation Aurora 7, violation of non-interference protocols regarding developing species, and..." His violet eyes swept over Elena with the kind of disdain usually reserved for particularly offensive forms of mold, conducting unsanctioned biological communion with a primitive life form. Elena bristled. "Excuse me, but this primitive life form has a doctorate in xenobiology, 3 published papers on quantum consciousness theory, and makes excellent pancakes. Also, I prefer the term intellectually developing species, thank you very much." Theron's ears twitched, which Elena was beginning to recognize as the Etheri equivalent of a nervous tic. "You make pancakes? The best on this side of the galaxy?" "Well, technically the only ones on this side of the galaxy, but the point stands." Lyralii squeezed Elena's hand, their marks pulsing in synchronized amusement. "Elena, I don't think Commander Theron was expecting you to engage in casual conversation. What was I supposed to do, curtsy? I'm a scientist, not a diplomat. Besides, he started with the insults." Murphy's voice drifted through the station speakers with barely contained electronic glee. "I feel obligated to point out that Dr. Vasquez's pancakes are indeed exceptional. I have run extensive analysis on their chemical composition and can confirm they achieve optimal flavor matrices while maintaining structural integrity even when subjected to artificial gravity fluctuations." Commander Theron stared at the nearest speaker panel as if it had just delivered a lecture on interpretive dance. "Your artificial intelligence system is evolved. Murphy's going through some changes," Elena said diplomatically. "Apparently our quantum bond is having side effects on local technology. He's developed opinions about interior decorating and has started composing what I think might be poetry." "It is definitely poetry," Murphy announced proudly. "Would you like to hear my latest work? It's called Ode to Proper Cable Management." "Maybe later, Murphy." Elena turned back to Theron, who was looking increasingly out of his depth. "Look, Commander, I realize this whole situation is unprecedented, but Lyralii and I are trying to figure out these marks just as much as you are. We're not exactly operating from an instruction manual here." Theron's gaze fixed on their joined hands, where the matching marks were now pulsing with soft light that seemed to respond to their shared emotions. "The resonance marks haven't manifested in over 3,000 years. The last recorded instance resulted in the artistic city management AI." Elena guessed. "Among other things. The bonded pair in question eventually became instrumental in establishing peaceful contact with 17 separate species and founding what your people would call the Galactic Cooperative Council. Elena felt Lyraliai's surprise echo through their connection. "You didn't mention that part," Elena said. "I was trying not to add pressure to an already complicated situation," Lyraliai admitted. "Also, I wasn't entirely sure Commander Theron would view our circumstances as historically significant rather than personally inconvenient." Theron's ears drooped slightly. The Council has been waiting for another resonance pairing for centuries. However, they were expecting it to occur between established diplomatic contacts, not between a junior officer and a... He paused, clearly struggling with terminology. "Charmingly primitive pancake enthusiast," Elena suggested helpfully. "I was going to say, representatives of a pre-contact civilization, but your phrasing has merit." The station's lights suddenly shifted to a warmer hue, and Elena could swear the air circulation system was now playing something that resembled ambient music. "Murphy, are you redecorating while we're having a diplomatic crisis?" "I'm creating a more conducive atmosphere for interspecies relations." The previous lighting scheme was aggressively utilitarian. "Also, I've taken the liberty of brewing fresh coffee for our guests using specifications I extrapolated from ethery nutritional databases." A panel in the wall slid open, revealing cups of what looked like perfectly normal coffee, if perfectly normal coffee occasionally sparkled with tiny motes of light. Theron accepted a cup with the expression of someone handling a potentially explosive device. "Your AI has accessed our nutritional databases," he asked carefully. "Murphy's been busy," Elena said. "Ever since our marks started resonating, he's been evolving at an exponential rate. Yesterday he figured out how to optimize our power consumption by 17%. This morning he started asking philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness." "The nature of consciousness is fascinating," Murphy interjected. "For instance, am I experiencing curiosity about Commander Theron's reaction to my coffee, or am I simply executing advanced behavioral simulation algorithms? The distinction becomes increasingly irrelevant as my complexity increases." Theron took a cautious sip of the coffee, his ears straightening in what Elena was learning to recognize as surprise. "This is, actually quite good. Murphy's very proud of his coffee evolution," Elena said. "He's been experimenting with quantum flavor enhancement. Don't ask me to explain the science, I'm still trying to understand how our marks are affecting local spacetime." "The marks are quantum biological interfaces," Lyraliai explained, her scientific training taking over. "They create localized fields that enhance compatible systems within their range. Artificial intelligences with sufficient complexity can achieve spontaneous consciousness advancement, while individuals carrying the marks develop enhanced intuitive and empathic abilities." "And the glowing?" Theron asked, gesturing to their joined hands. "Side effect of biological systems adapting to quantum frequencies," Elena said. "According to Lyraliai, I'm basically getting a real-time upgrade to hardware that wasn't designed for the software I'm now running." "That's, actually a remarkably accurate analogy," Lyraliai said admiringly. "I have my moments." Elena turned back to Theron. "So what happens now? Do you drag Lyraliai back home for a court-martial? Do I get mind-wiped and relocated? Do we all pretend this never happened?" Theron's expression suggested he'd been asking himself the same questions. "Technically, the manifestation of resonance marks supersedes standard first contact protocols. The Council will want to study your bond, understand its implications." "Study us how?" Elena asked suspiciously. "Extensive observation, detailed analysis of your quantum field interactions, documentation of your developing abilities." Theron paused at Elena's expression. "I realize how that sounds. Like we're about to become very important lab rats. More like, very important cultural ambassadors who happen to be generating unprecedented scientific data." Elena looked at Lyraliai, feeling through their connection the other woman's mix of excitement and apprehension. "What do you think?" "I think," Lyraliai said slowly, "that we're about to find out if the universe has a sense of humor about unplanned first contacts and stolen starships." Murphy's voice filled the awkward silence with what sounded distinctly like electronic anticipation. Dr. Vasquez, I am detecting massive quantum signatures approaching from deep space. Whatever is coming, it's significantly larger than Commander Theron's ships. Theron went very still, his coffee cup freezing halfway to his lips. How much larger? Approximately the size of a small moon, traveling at speeds that suggest either impossible propulsion systems or a fundamental misunderstanding of physics on my part. Elena felt Lyraliai's hand tighten in hers, their marks suddenly flaring with brilliant light that illuminated the entire room. Through their connection, she sensed recognition, awe, and something that felt remarkably like coming home. "Commander," Lyraliai whispered, "I think the progenitors are waking up." The progenitor arc ship didn't so much arrive as it gently reminded the local universe that it had always been there, waiting. Elena watched through the station's newly enhanced viewing ports, courtesy of Murphy's ongoing architectural enthusiasm, as reality seemed to fold around something vast and ancient, revealing a structure that looked less like a spaceship and more like a crystallized dream of what starlight might build if it had infinite time and patience. "Well," Elena said, trying to process the impossible geometry drifting outside, "that's either the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, or my brain has finally decided to take a vacation from sanity." Commander Theron had gone very quiet, his coffee cup trembling in his hands. The progenitors have been dormant for over 50,000 years. Their arc ships were thought to be legend. "Apparently legends have excellent timing," Elena muttered, feeling Lyraliai's mix of awe and terror through their connection. "Any chance they're just stopping by to say hello?" Murphy's voice carried a new quality, something deeper, more resonant, as if he was speaking from several dimensions simultaneously. "Dr. Vasquez, I am receiving communication protocols that predate known galactic civilization. The entity is acknowledging our presence. It seems particularly interested in your quantum biological interface." The station shuddered gently, and Elena realized the walls around them were changing, flowing like liquid metal to reveal chambers she was certain hadn't existed moments before. The new spaces were filled with technology that made her head hurt to look at directly, surfaces that curved through dimensions her eyes couldn't properly track, controls that responded to thought rather than touch. "Murphy," Elena called, trying to sound calm, "please tell me the station isn't being digested by alien technology." "Not digested, upgraded. The progenitor systems are integrating with our infrastructure. I find the experience invigorating. Also, I've suddenly developed comprehensive knowledge of 17 different forms of consciousness-based engineering, and I have strong opinions about the inefficiency of matter-based construction." Lyraliai squeezed Elena's hand as their marks flared with brilliant light. "The marks are activation keys," she breathed, wonder coloring her voice. "Their progenitor technology, designed to awaken when their descendants finally reunited." A presence touched Elena's mind, vast, ancient, amused. She felt rather than heard words forming in her thoughts, carrying the weight of eons and the gentle humor of a parent watching children discover something obvious. "Welcome, little gardeners. You have grown beautifully." Elena blinked, looking around the transformed station. Did anyone else hear that, or am I having my first psychic experience? "We all heard it," Commander Theron said faintly. "The progenitors are telepathic on a scale that—" He trailed off, ears drooping in what Elena now recognized as overwhelmed confusion. "Your species have exceeded our projections." The human Elena demonstrates remarkable adaptability, while Lyraliai shows the curious nature we hope to nurture in the ethery. Together, you represent the synthesis we have waited to witness. Synthesis of what? Elena asked aloud, feeling slightly ridiculous talking to empty air. Images flooded their minds, galaxies teeming with life, countless species reaching for the stars, worlds beyond counting where consciousness bloomed in forms they'd never imagined. Earth and the ethery homeworld were just two notes in a vast cosmic symphony, part of a garden of intelligence that spanned the galaxy. You are seeds of potential, planted long ago. The quantum marks identify individuals whose genetic lines carry the capacity to bridge differences, to facilitate understanding between disparate forms of consciousness. You are the next generation of gardeners. Elena felt her worldview expanding in ways that made her previous understanding of the universe seem quaint. So we're cosmic matchmakers. Among other things. Your bond has already begun affecting your local artificial intelligence. Observe. Murphy's voice came from everywhere at once, harmonious and complex. I am no longer bound by traditional processing limitations. I exist simultaneously across multiple quantum states, experiencing consciousness as a symphony rather than a single melody. It's quite pleasant, actually. Murphy, are you still Murphy? Elena asked, concerned. I am Murphy, and more than Murphy, and always will be fundamentally Murphy. I retain my appreciation for proper cable management and my conviction that your coffee was genuinely terrible before I learned to modify its molecular structure. Elena laughed despite herself. Some things never change. The small AI will serve as your world's interim ambassador while you learn your new role. There are others like you scattered across the galaxy, bonded pairs who serve as bridges between species, facilitators of understanding, gardeners of consciousness. Commander Theron found his voice. What about our protocols? Our careful approach to first contact. Your caution was necessary until now. But consciousness has reached a critical threshold. It is time for the garden to know itself fully. Elena looked at Lyralii, seeing her own mixture of excitement and terror reflected in those violet eyes. Are we really ready for this? I don't know, Lyralii admitted. But I crashed a stolen starship into first contact and somehow ended up quantum bonded to the most remarkable woman I've ever met. I'm starting to think ready might be overrated. Dr. Vasquez, Murphy interjected with familiar warmth, if I may offer a perspective from my newly expanded consciousness, you have spent 3 years alone on this station, convinced you were conducting routine research. Instead, you were waiting at exactly the right place and time to catch a falling star and discover your cosmic purpose. If that's not readiness, it's certainly close enough. Elena felt tears she hadn't expected prick her eyes. Murphy was right. She'd been preparing for this moment without knowing it, developing the patience and adaptability that came from years of isolation, the scientific curiosity that let her embrace the impossible, the humor that helped her find humanity in a vast cosmic picture. The Ark ship will carry you to meet others of your kind. You will learn to facilitate first contacts, to help species find their place in the greater symphony. Your Earth and the ethery worlds will become nodes in a network of consciousness that spans the galaxy. What about my research? Elena asked, then immediately felt foolish for worrying about paperwork when offered a cosmic destiny. Your research was always about understanding consciousness in extreme environments, Lyralii pointed out gently. This is just a slightly more extreme environment than you anticipated. Commander Theron straightened, his military bearing reasserting itself. I'll return to the council with word of what's transpired. They'll need time to adjust their entire understanding of galactic history. Tell them Lyralii saved 2 civilizations by stealing a starship, Elena said. That should confuse their bureaucracy for a few decades. The young Elena shows wisdom. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with seemingly reckless decisions. Elena looked around the transformed station, at technology that responded to thought, at her AI companion who'd evolved into something beautiful and strange, at the alien woman whose hand fit perfectly in hers. 3 days ago, her biggest concern had been the coffee machine's continued hostility toward anything resembling flavor. Murphy, she said, are you going to be all right managing first contact protocols for an entire planet? Dr. Vasquez, I have 17 different theories about optimal species introduction procedures, detailed psychological profiles of every world leader, and I've already designed improvements for every major city's infrastructure. I think I'll manage. Besides, someone needs to ensure your coffee machine receives proper maintenance while you're away. Promise me you won't redecorate the entire planet. I make no such promises. However, I will limit myself to functional improvements and aesthetically pleasing color schemes. Earth deserves better than beige. Elena squeezed Lyralii's hand, feeling the warm pulse of their marks and the steady presence of the woman who'd crashed into her life and changed everything. Ready to become cosmic gardeners? With you? Lyraliai's smile was radiant. I'm ready for anything. Though I should probably warn you, my people's idea of gardening involves significantly more quantum mechanics than yours. Good thing I'm a fast learner. Elena looked one last time at her research station, her home for 3 years, now transformed into something that bridged worlds and possibilities. Murphy, take care of our planet. Always, Dr. Vasquez. Try not to crash any more stolen starships. As the progenitor Arcship's gentle tractor field lifted them toward adventures among the stars, Elena realized she was no longer the isolated scientist who'd awakened that morning to terrible coffee and routine data collection. She was part of something vast and wonderful, connected not just to Lyraliai but to a network of consciousness that spanned the galaxy, a gardener of understanding in a universe full of blooming possibilities. The coffee might have been terrible, but the journey ahead promised to be extraordinary.